So I wanted to start off initially by giving everyone a chance to understand that this panel, which was Valentina's idea and came from some various experiences that she had had and that many of my students at FrauenLoop have had with having certain expectations as aspiring data scientists and being faced with very different expectations sometimes of the market based on differences in what hiring managers and recruiters, tech recruiters, and HR managers are asking for and actually seeking for the various data science roles. That's part of the reason why we've invited a panel with very diverse experiences in technology, in academia, in different fields that have come into data science or data analysis or data engineering with the expectation that they could grow and they could progress their careers working on data teams or working individually as data professionals. So I want to start off by asking the panel or the group as an initial question that given how much hype we've lived through and seen with C++ and PHP and JavaScript being the hot technologies of the moment, now that data science is kind of one of the technology skills or skill sets that is being hired for, particularly here in Berlin. I'd like to know how each of you discovered data science for industry, what got you interested, and what you know now about working in data science in industry that you didn't know when you were applying.
Okay, I think I will start. So I started out with a degree in information systems, which is computer science and business, and it was very math focused. We had a lot of statistics, and I happened to like it a lot. And but it was always not enough for me to see statistics in order to do some analysis past you had collected some data to get some insights. I was always interested what you can build products with it using that methodology. And I was very, very happy that I discovered machine learning a little bit before the hype. And I had courses in university teaching machine learning, a little bit more the old-fashioned way. But I found it really, really cool and really interested. And I was actually surprised when I found out that they can actually make a career with it and it can do cool stuff. And yeah, that's how I got interested. And I was lucky to get a job at SAP. And maybe what I know now, what I hadn't known before, is the amount of data engineering you actually have to put into getting machine learning products to run. And you cannot just apply some fancy method on some data which is not there in the normal case. And you have to put a lot of work in it in order to get the data where you can actually apply what you want to do in order to get the stuff done, what you want to achieve.
I actually don't do data science. I'm a data warehouse engineer, but I'm self-taught, so that's kind of related. I first got interested in this topic in my last trimester of FrauenLoop program when we had an SQL course that I absolutely loved. I fell in love with it, and I was like, okay, I'm definitely going down that path, so let's see what I can pair it with. So I started Googling, and then I discovered, wow, so I can do Python and SQL. Okay, what does that mean? Google said data science. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do data science then. So then after FrauenLoop, where I was doing the SQL and a lot of projects in SQL and a lot of quizzes, I went to Coursera and I did a lot of projects on Python and then doing data analysis with Python and then a bunch of other stuff. And then I started applying for jobs and I got my internship, my first internship as a data engineer. And actually the task was a machine learning task that I had to do. They were very impressed with my skills, even though I had only applied like a really simple model on the data that they had sent me. And they were like, yeah, we want you to work for us. It's an internship. I was like, wow, my first internship. I'll take it. And then after 6 months of internship, I started applying for junior roles. And this is where I currently work at as a junior data warehouse engineer at Wimdu. And yeah.
Yeah, hi. For me, this job as a consultant / data analyst for this market-driven company is basically it's a second career. I work for 10 years as a journalist, so I kind of know data science from the data journalism perspective, but only vaguely. I also did my master's here in Germany in environmental management, so there was some sort of like data analysis going on there, but not that much. At that time, during my master's here, I was working for a software company, but on the marketing side, on the qualitative side, during that time, I was also doing the data science and SQL course at FrauenLoop. So after a few months, I managed to ask them, like, guys, can you put me in a situation where I can do a bit of coding? And they put me in with the data science team, which was at that time very small team, like only 2 people were there. And the job was initially to support the product, which was a chatbot. So I learned a lot about NLP there, learned a bit of Keras, a lot of hyperparameter tuning, that kind of thing. And but to be honest, because my background was not in computer science, and this company had a lot of coding for production tasks, that's somewhere where I kind of like felt a bit out of my depth, to be honest. But for other things, I was doing okay-ish, I think. I'm still learning, but I got to a position where the company I work for was looking for a consultant who has like knowledge of NLP and knows the theories behind sentiment analysis and all that kind of things. For me, the biggest revelation was that machine learning or data science is not exclusively for computing or IT jobs, that it can be applied to different industries like, say, journalism or environment. And my thinking is that in the future, I can go to these industries with this skill set, and it would be very useful.
So when Nakeema asked me to join this panel, I was thinking, how did I end up in data science? It seems like I can't even remember. So then I was digging back in my memory, and I think it was 2008 I was starting my PhD, and it took me, I forget, 2 or 3 days to figure out how to load a CSV file into R. This was before Stack Exchange and stuff like that. And then 9 years later, I got a job at Zalando. So there's the inspiring story for you there. But just to fill in a bit, so I had a kind of more traditional sort of academic career, but all during that time, that experience of taking so long to do something that was so easy, just loading a data set into R, seemed crazy to me. And so I just over the years spent a ton of my time working on learning how to do software development and automating a lot of the sort of processes from statistics class that weren't actually taught and were just really hard to do. And then a couple years ago, I actually was, there's a famous data scientist at Harvard, and he has a number of pieces of software that a lot of people used in my statistics department, and it was kind of like all that, it was just going really poorly. Nobody was maintaining that stuff, and it was always, it wasn't backward compatible, it was crashing all the time, so I wrote all these blog posts about how crappy it was becoming. And then he actually said, well, why don't you come and fix it? And so that was the first like full-time sort of software data science job that I had that wasn't just academics, and then from that I moved on into my current career in Zalando. So it was a very long and windy path.
Okay, I want to go back to something that Alina said about when you started applying. And so you said that when you started applying, you faced a lot of challenges in terms of preparing and applying for different roles. What did you know what role within the data science field your skills best matched when you started applying? This is a general question for everyone. I
I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't know how not to do it.
What didn't you want to do?
I didn't want to do web development. Yes.
Any web development?
Yes, any web development. I know I've said this before, and probably you're tired of hearing this. I didn't like JavaScript. So, yeah. I really liked SQL and Python, and I really wanted to find something in this direction. I didn't actually know the difference between a data engineer and a data scientist before I actually landed my first internship. So I was on to take whatever there was on the market that could help me grow in this field. So I just applied for a number of jobs. I can't count them anymore. And then they just sent me challenges, tasks, or they asked me for whiteboard interviews.
I have to ask Chris and Marius, because you both had more academic training within the data science field before applying for your first industry jobs. Did you also face the whiteboarding challenges and the take-home exercises, and were they as terrifying for you as they seem to be for others?
So I had this whiteboard interview, even though it was not really whiteboard, it was online. But I was lucky to not had homework, and I was lucky enough to I had known it before that there would be a whiteboard interview, and I could prepare. I was happy, but they still were very frightening, and I think the hardest part of an interview I'd ever done in my life so far.
Chris?
So I have a ridiculous answer to this question, which is no, I never had to do that because I had, I don't even remember how many statistics articles and software packages that I had developed before. And so that, I don't know why Zalando didn't ask me to do that, but I think it was because I had this track record of applied work that people could see. Kind of unusual, perhaps.
Yeah, so maybe I also have an answer for your question prior to that. If I knew what kind of role I wanted to apply for, I didn't have a name for this role. So I knew I wanted to apply machine learning. I want to work with the new state-of-the-art machine learning models, but I didn't know what job description that was. And I looked a lot, and you find data scientist, you find machine learning engineer, you find machine learning researcher, you find data scientist. And I found out that sometimes the overlap is quite large. There's no textbook definition what a data scientist or a data engineer or a machine learning researcher actually does. There's no real consensus across the industry. So there was a lot of work that I needed to do to really understand the job postings and to figure out what I would actually do. And sometimes this was really hard because a lot of job postings are poorly written, and sometimes you have the feeling it was written by somebody that is not from that field, or they're building up a new department and have no clue what they actually want to have or want to do.
And just really quickly on that, that is very much part of the experience that I had also, right? So we just have so many words for the same thing. So I had looked at data science jobs sort of over the years, but didn't know if I was qualified for them or not because just the terminology was different than I was used to. And I was like, I think I know that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, and then sometimes also old jobs get relabeled. So like a classical statistician job is now a data scientist. This is also, you suddenly find job postings that then you think, oh, I'm not qualified for. But maybe also statisticians that would be qualified also don't find it because probably nowadays they would also look for data scientists, but a couple of years ago they might have not. So
a more general question might be, how do you tell a good role whether or not you're fully qualified for it? How do you tell a good description of a data science role from a poor description of a data science role?
This is very difficult. You usually don't know in advance all the time. Sometimes if they're very, very generic, then I have the feeling, okay, this might not be it, because then they might not have an understanding what they want to have. And if they're more specific, and if I could relate, okay, and have an idea of what I would be actually doing, then then that would be a better posting.
Yeah, for me, it's like based on the position and the task. I recently had a recruiter called me recently, and I wasn't really, based on his description, it was really difficult to glean what the role is exactly. It said there, he said it's a data analyst position, okay, but beyond that, there's not a lot of information. So I asked him, okay, what kind of libraries do you use? Because that would help me a lot in thinking where the company is. But even then, even that he couldn't really say, except beyond the usual pandas and SciPy libraries. But he said there's more, so I'm like, okay, I really don't know what this position is all about.
What do you wish that non-specialists knew about data science or data science roles or tasks that they don't seem to always express in the job descriptions?
That for me, I've noticed, and like it was also what I saw in my other companies, that there's a lot of like quote-unquote manual labor in data science, stuff that like you really cannot automate immediately, and you need like people with no, they don't really have to have like data science experience. In my previous job, they just had a factory of students creating training data and figuring out the taxonomy of the data that they're. So these people, like they're not from computer science, they're working students. I've also noticed that like some jobs that traditionally do not require some data science skill set are now requiring that, but just the basic. For instance, in consulting, in the past, my company had consulting positions that they just asked, "Are you good at Excel?" and that's it. But now they require the consultants like to interact with Python scripts, like open a file, run it, and if there's an error, they have to know what it is so that they can talk to the relevant person. So, yeah, there's a lot of variety, I think, in the pipeline that doesn't really require like PhDs or, I think, masters in computing, in machine learning. Yeah.
For people who are trying to figure out how to navigate the whole HR and getting past HR, what would you say, based on your varied experience, is the best way to prepare yourself for a role in data science at different levels? What are the requirements if you had to list them?
So I would say first know what you're applying for, what the specific skill set is that you need, as far as you can do that. And out of my perspective, is I try to get practical experience as much in that field as you can get. And if you haven't, and also if you know that there could be a whiteboard interview, prepare for it, and you can train it, and you can practice this. I think this helps also a lot, because if you can practice for something, then you should do it, because people that hire you probably will expect that you practice it before, and you will have a disadvantage if you don't. That would be my advice. Even though this process seems a little bit odd, that you practice something that is sometimes maybe not related to the things you were going to be doing on the job, but you still need to practice in order to pass this barrier.
So my experience with HR is pretty various, because at some point on the telephone, the HR recruiter asks you if you know if you have knowledge of a certain tech stack, and they ask you, for instance, so do you have any experience with Postgres? And I'm like, no, but I do with MySQL. And then they they make a break in the conversation, and then they repeat the same question but with different words. Like, what's your experience with Postgres? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I already said I don't have any experience with Postgres, but I do with MySQL. And then it's like, well, of course, because they don't know what the difference texts are, right? So this is why they keep asking. They like have a certain number of questions that they need to ask, and they get a yes or no answer, and that's what they are satisfied with. Yeah. And then about the whiteboard interview. Having a first whiteboard interview with no CS formal background is the scariest thing ever. Even like preparing for 3 days in advance, right? You don't know what exactly to prepare. So you prepare everything. But of course, being there and having to code in front of other people while they judge your code, and also keeping in mind that you have to be verbose about it, right? And you have to explain your process, and you have to put it into words, right? You have to think about the technical concepts that you're using while using them. That's, I don't know, not very straightforward in my experience. So yeah, do prepare, but maybe don't expect to be successful from the first time.
Yeah, I've never had a whiteboard interview. I think because I've only applied for jobs that are basically data analysts that have very strong business orientation. So my interviews have always been with the business side. I think with me, it helped that I already had projects, and I could. I've done like a sentiment analysis and topic modeling at a professional level, even though it was very simple. It meant that I knew their business concepts. They also asked me for market business questions, like case analysis, and how I can apply machine learning concepts on it. So that was my experience.
So I set up the interview questions with the recruiters, and so I guess from that perspective, it's very much that in my experience, the recruiters don't have data science backgrounds. They, as you were saying, they don't know what any of these things are, so they require the person who's coming up with the interview to basically come up with like a list of words that they're looking for, right? So technologies or methods or these kind of things. And then it's a matter not so much of, I mean, if you can speak in detail about this, you need that for later in the interview, but at the initial HR interview, you just need to know, or this is my experience of this, you need to know that you actually can talk at least briefly and coherently about each of those and sort of demonstrate a bit of experience, right? So like I did this with this tool, even if it's not very in-depth, but that's kind of for the initial HR part of the process.
I'm interested in how business knowledge and storytelling and soft skills that might not necessarily be related to programming ability contribute to your confidence and contribute to your viability as a candidate for a data role. How important do you think it is, especially Chris, when you're in a hiring position, how important is it that candidates understand that their data is not going to live and die within the data team, but it's eventually going to go out to other functions and other areas that don't necessarily know or care about the algorithms behind this data? They just want a story to be told.
That's huge. So as somebody who manages a team of people like this, and then we have to communicate what we've done to other teams who in often cases are sort of more fashion, soft-skilled sort of background people and don't know anything about statistics, or could probably, would have a hard time talking about standard deviations or even knowing what those are. That's really huge. And actually one thing that I almost always ask in the interviews that I do is for people to actually go through kind of the whole research process that they go through. So like, what was the research question you had? Why did you have that question? And if it's for a school project, then that's kind of, easy and not that informative, right? I was told to have this question. But if it's for a more industry project, that can often be really informative, right? So we identified this customer problem, and so then this was the data we had, and et cetera, et cetera. And then how do you communicate the results of your process or of the research you've done is really, really massive also.
I would definitely agree. So this was, for my job posting, it was not a requirement to have storytelling skills or even visualization skills. But it turns out that this is one of the most important parts of my work if I want to get my work recognized. Because we're working with internal stakeholders, and similar as to your job, they have no clue about data science or statistics or statistical methods. And if you get good visualizations and you have a good story to tell, then you can convince them that what you build is actually valuable and they can use it and hopefully also make money out of it so that the company profits from it. And if that is not possible, then probably your project will die or will not be continued, or they will not really implement it or say, yeah, it's nice, and then move on to something else. So this is really an important skill that I think really belongs to a data science role, that you can do this.
I know that, Kay, your role, because you're a consultant, officially, is definitely focused on visualization, storytelling, and kind of client communications. But for everyone else in the group, how much do you feel like data visualization on its own should be, and maybe is or is not, treated as a specialization or an area of strength? And how much is it just assumed that you will be able to do the visualizations and put a coherent story together with the data on top of cleaning it, ensuring that it's valid, having some understanding of how much confidence you can have in it?
Like, the visualization is important for my company. Like, I've been doing this PowerPoint for 3 weeks now. So with the team. So yeah, I'm kind of like tired of it. But anyway, so because it's the people who will consume your project. The report are not people with data science background. It's cross-functional. People from the marketing team and from the business side are also going to read it. So yes, it's important to have the data, presented in a manner that's understandable to everybody. Our data scientists are also required to create this visualization, visualized reports. So yes, it's pretty important for at least the consulting side of the company. In the past, like in my other data science job, it wasn't that important, but you have to be able to talk to the other teams because you will have some needs with them. So yeah, it's important to have to be able to explain things in a clear way to other people who don't have that background.
We at WIMDO have actually separate roles for the visualization person. So I'm more in the background doing the ETLs, and then there's my colleague who does the visualization reports for marketing, for finance, for whoever needs them. So I seldomly do reports in Tableau because that's also part of the job description. But yeah, like my main focus is on how to get the data from source to our main database. But yeah, my colleague, she's the one telling stories to marketing and finance about why the data is so bad.
So my role, I think it was definitely assumed that we could do it in our machine learning department. For the business analyst departments, I don't know. It might be different. But for our machine learning tasks, it's assumed that you can communicate the results appropriately.
How much of that comes up in the interview process?
Not at all.
For me, it came up in the interview process because they made me do a presentation. That was my like the technical side of my interview, one of the technical side of the interview.
Chris, I know you have people walk you through their process, but does it include visualization and explanation of those?
I guess it doesn't include visualization. That's kind of a good idea, maybe. But I'll take that. But it does definitely include people describing their results, right? So oftentimes their results will be something, or the research they did is something that I don't know anything about, and so that's a really great opportunity to, do I understand what you're talking about in this interview is a good indicator of whether or not they're going to be able to convince other people, I guess.
I'm interested in how, given how much buzz there is around data science in general and how little information there tends to be outside of the PyData community about the different specializations, how easy do you think it is for someone who's switching fields to break into the data field in Berlin?
I'll start then. So I don't think it's that easy, mainly because, like Chris and Marius said, the job descriptions are not very straightforward. So as a newbie trying to change careers, like from a non-technical to a technical, what do you look for? You know, because business intelligence developer, data engineering, data warehouse engineering, they all can require the same set of responsibilities, but not necessarily. So where do you go looking for that? I don't know. It's like I started looking for keywords. Okay, so I'm using this, I have experience with that, and maybe I can learn this, right? And then, yeah, you start applying to a bunch of jobs that seemingly have nothing to do, have nothing in common to one another.
So I came from the humanities, and I think it was a bit difficult to break into the IT side of things here in Germany. I also came from the Philippines, so a lot of my credentials were suspect. But anyway. When I started with FrauenLoop, it got me to a point where I could say to the HR of the software company where I was working for, "Hey, I know this thing actually, so give me tasks that that involve these things." And I think that position really helped because I learned a lot of machine learning there. I was also able to implement like a machine learning project for another company that I was working for because I was working 2 part-time jobs at that time. And having those projects really kind of like boosted my CV, and it allowed me to talk to recruiters and to in a more knowledgeable way. Like sometimes I'm like way ahead of them because like we said, they really have the basic knowledge of what goes on. Sometimes I'm ahead of them when it comes to like certain concepts, like what they're looking for. So that for me, that I wouldn't have I think broken into it without those factors.
So if it's easy, I cannot tell because I lack the experience around it. So if I come from a computer science background, I think this helped. In order to come from other backgrounds, which is definitely possible, and I see it in my team, we have quite some backgrounds. I don't know if it's easy for them, but I think it might be easier to get into a data role from a different background than computer science compared to becoming a software engineer from a different background, I would say.
That raises the question to me as to how important additional learning opportunities or sponsorship or mentoring availability in a company, in a role, might be when you're applying. So I guess I wonder, for each of you, I wonder whether you had any expectation of receiving either additional learning opportunities through the job or mentoring from a manager or from a senior
So I was very clear from the beginning with every interview I had that I'm a junior. I need like learning opportunities, and that I expect some sort of mentorship from my seniors. And almost all of them said, yes, of course, no problem. Yes, we have a bunch of seniors that look forward to getting you started and like teaching you all our, like getting you into the business flow. Of course, like with most of them, the final part of the interview was like, we really do appreciate your work and your skills, but unfortunately you're not a culture fit. So yeah, I think even though they say they can provide mentorship, they don't actually realize the importance of being guided, like on a daily basis, or or like getting mentoring for like specific tasks that you are responsible for. Also, most of the companies, I think, don't have or don't want to invest in time training juniors because that's not bringing any revenue for the company. I don't know. But that's super crucial for juniors, like having someone there guiding them, or like being available for answering questions, no matter how many times you ask the same question, you know, they're willing to provide the right answer, or like to ask in their turn questions so that you find the solution yourself, right? That requires time, patience, and not many companies are willing to invest in that.
I would highly recommend not taking a job that wasn't very explicit about the growth and learning opportunities that you have. So data science is such a, first of all, it's such a complex field that you need to build your career, you need to be going deeper and deeper oftentimes. And also the technologies are changing so fast that you need to be keeping up with that. So if you're, the employer doesn't even conceive of that as an important part of your work, to be deepening your skills and keeping up with technological change, then I wouldn't want to work for them. In terms of how to know if they're kind of right about that. So as you pointed out, like everybody always says that they're, you know, we want to mentor you and it's, you know, this kind of thing. But as somebody who's kind of a manager and I guess technically also a mentor, like I just have so many meetings all day long. It's just so busy, right? So I try my best, but I'm limited in my ability to do that. And so what we have that's great at Zalando is a lot of explicit learning opportunities, right? So like courses that we run in-house, or making sure that you can have a certain percentage of your work week that's for learning, these kind of things that are much more likely to actually happen than sort of a vague promise of mentorship or something like that.
Same. In my previous company, they also have like a percentage of your time you can like do for personal development. Like, so if you want to do an online course on company time, you can do it for like an hour every day. I think also companies have to realize that there are people in their, companies who are like, who want to be mentors. There was if I hadn't like, if I didn't need a full-time job, I would stay in that other company, because there was a woman there who was like really willing to mentor me, and she wanted that as well. And we could do pair. We were doing pair programming, and she was very good at explaining a lot of concepts to me. So that was really cool. Yeah, and so I think companies should also look on that side.
When I graduated from university, I was well aware of the lack of knowledge that I had in the data science field. And when I applied for jobs, I somewhat applied mostly for bigger companies, or at least I wanted to work in a company where I know there were other data scientists. Because some companies just hired a data scientist, and I didn't want to be the only one. Because I wanted to learn, I wanted to see how it's done in industry, how it's done in practice. And yeah, sometimes bigger companies can give you this advantage because you don't have the product pressure immediately hitting you all the time, that they actually can give you learning opportunities, and that they have a big team of data scientists that you can work with and collaborate with and learn from them.
I wondered how vocal all of you, or most of you, were about seeking mentorship opportunities and seeking support for your continued learning when you were applying. Did that occur to you? Was that something you asked for explicitly?
I did in my interviews, because this was really important for me. Not in the very beginning, but at some stage in the interview I would say that this is really important for me, especially because of the field, especially in machine learning. You go on vacation and you have 3 new papers improving the state of the art in some domain, and learning is really, really essential.
Yes, for me, same as well. Like I told them, like on Mondays I have to leave early because I have a Python class. So yeah, so they let me do that. And aside from that, I've talked to like the other data scientists, and they are like making me learn R. Yeah. It's like, and I was like, yeah, but it's okay. So because the main language in the company is R, so like, okay, fine.
Yeah, I was also very explicit about being mentored, and with like also in my internship, also in my current role, I am very lucky to have a boss that's very, very, very patient with me and teaching me everything he taught himself 7 years ago when he started building the infrastructure. So yeah. Also, like in my internship, whenever I didn't have any projects to work on, my mentor would suggest like doing a course on Coursera. You know, company pays, so why not? So like maybe you can do like a course on algorithms, because it's not really your very best strength. So yeah.
What's the top skill that you think, this is a question to everyone, what's the top skill that you think that your company requires for you to successfully win a position in data science? And why do you think you were hired?
Can I just answer the other question really quickly? So as someone who does interviews, usually near the end of the interview, there's like, do you have any questions for us? And I almost sort of require that people ask, what are the opportunities that I have to develop my skills and knowledge, right? Because that's just an indication that that person actually cares about the work and about really kind of driving their skills forward. And those are the sort of people that I want on my team. So. Sorry, I forgot your other question.
So then for everyone else, what do you think you were hired for? What skill specifically do you think was the deciding factor in your being hired?
I think for me, it was like the machine learning background. Even though the job is not a traditional data science, they want to be able to relieve some of the pressure from the data scientists. So having an in-house analyst there who could code is valuable to the team. There are also, I think, projects in the pipeline for their clients on NLP. I'm not sure where that will go, but I think somebody who has working experience on that was also valuable for them.
I think my best skill that I was hired for was my ability to learn.
You think or you know?
I know.
So I don't know, but I hope that it was for my machine learning knowledge, and maybe also for my ability to communicate it and to talk about what I could do and what I cannot do.
So mine's a little idiosyncratic, but maybe also it has a kernel of generality to it, which is my data science background paired also with a knowledge of a non-data science field, which is economics. Not that is necessarily general to all other people, but the ability to not just be about data science, but also to pair it with some substantive knowledge in another field can be really valuable, I think.
What do you wish that, or rather, what's the biggest misconception that people in business have about what data science and what data scientists can do?
So with this recent AI hype, this gets really intermingled with data science, and suddenly data science can solve everything and every problem.
And quickly.
And quickly and without data. So I think that's the biggest misconception, that it's not only about the data science and the data analysis skill, but that there's this whole strategy that belongs to it with around data.
In the company, people not from the business intelligence team think that when deploying an algorithm, then suddenly our ranking will like go on top of the mountain, right? Because you're like doing data science. You're supposed to do that. Why aren't we ranking first, on Google when looking for apartments? What did you do with the data?
I think like the ones that I've seen so far, like they think they have enough data already and that their data is great and clean, but there's like a lot of like it's not enough. It's never going to be enough to what they want us to do. That kind of situation. Yeah.
So there are many big misconceptions, but one is kind of thinking that just having a lot of data, so just big data, well then we have tons of insights that are in this huge amount of data, but you don't actually have any variation in the data, right? So it's kind of like during the World Cup, sales of World Cup jerseys like really go up, and it's like, okay, well, sure. But we don't have any kind of variation in that data to really learn some actionable insights from. So that's a big misconception.
What do you think that lack of specific understanding about what data science is and what specializations it encompasses means for hiring? What does that look like in terms of, from your experiences, what does that look like in terms of who gets interviews and what kind of profiles seem like they're going to lead to a team of data scientists?
This is a difficult question. One misconception that I have not talked about before is that you need superstars and academics to do data science. And I think that this is the major effect that shows in the hiring process, that I have the feeling that companies try to hire the most academic person they can find, the most researchy person they can find, and maybe ignoring other people that can do the same job, maybe better, maybe worse, I don't know, without having a proper process to separate for the real competencies they want to look for, and not if they just have a PhD or 5 research publications in the data field.
Has anyone else run up against that kind of expectation that they should have either more research or more proof, academic proof of statistics or any other specific qualifications?
I wasn't asked for like any, I don't know, academic records or, I was just, my GitHub account was always present on my CV, and there I have a couple of projects that I worked on, like including like software development and data science projects. So our discussions always started from there, right? I wasn't asked for like anything else on top of that, like no statistics, no anything. Of course, I'm also not doing any data science. So.
For me, it depends. Like if it's an HR person, yes, they ask. But if it's the person who's actually doing the technical work, that's less of an importance than actually knowing the task behind the job. Say, like for instance, you can talk like they talk more about like, what library have you been using, what projects have you done, what did you do to solve these things. Those were the questions that they asked more.
No, I was just going to ask what you would recommend, because I keep hearing that the projects that you can demonstrate or talk about are important, whether or not you have computer science, statistics, economics, whatever your background might be. How would you recommend, if you have recommendations, for people who are either self-taught or trying to build up a GitHub repository of projects that they can then use to get into a full-time role?
So open source in general, and also GitHub has basically totally changed the trajectory of my life. I would be a more traditional kind of just weedy academic person. Now I'm a weedy data science person. And I guess the opportunity to build a portfolio of work to demonstrate kind of my skills and also develop those skills is really huge. And I almost always look for that in new candidates that I look at. But also just for me, it was being part of this bigger community of everybody else who was trying to sort of figure things out and is very supportive and contributory, made me want to be part of a community like this. So that was a really big part of it for me.
Last question before we open it up for questions from the audience. What is the one thing you would like to see changed in Berlin about the whole data science job, hiring, advertisement, process, setup that as it currently exists?
So maybe I come back to the point that I made at the beginning of the discussion, is that companies should get clear about what they want and what competencies they want and make them explicit, and then look from there what they can ask or what they should ask from the potential candidates. I know that if you post a job posting with data science on it, you probably will be flooded with applications, but still one shouldn't exclude portions of possible candidates that might do awesome work.
I would suggest the same, maybe. Yeah, like I would like for companies to give more chances to people with no formal background in the field, but who can demonstrate their ability to work on projects, either looking at their GitHub repository or, I don't know, making them go through a challenge or more. I would also like for the interview processes to change a bit. I've had way too many negative experiences when interviewing, when in the final phase, after waiting for 2 weeks for an answer, I just got a reply saying, none of the challenges you worked on are correct. None of the results for the challenges are correct. End of discussion. So maybe giving or like focusing on the positive aspects of work that was being done, I don't know, would change a bit the level of frustration going on in the field. And yeah, like maybe giving people a more personalized feedback would also encourage them to come back or go back into the industry and not, I don't know, shut them off. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my wish is along those lines, that people will be more imaginative when it comes to like hiring people, in the sense that, yeah, people who candidates with different backgrounds, can have a chance to, talk about what they can do. It would also be nice, for, like I've had interviews where people they ask you to come back 3 times, like why? And then the last interview would be like, it's just the CTO asking you one question. It's like, what is this for? Like they didn't even ask for a whiteboard interview, which was frustrating because you prepare for a Python test, and at the end there's like a question about like how many babies do you think will be born in Shanghai in this year? It's like, why? I was like, yeah, I don't know. It was super strange. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I've had good interviews where people were straight to the point, and I think they were empowered by their companies to, ask questions and make certain decisions. I would like that more to happen, so like we don't waste each other's time.
I don't know if this is particular to Berlin, but just like the buzzwords in the job ads, and especially in the hiring managers, it's kind of annoying, but also it's difficult for people to break into the field because you don't, going back to the terminology, you don't know like what your skills are and how well they match the job ad, and then you might end up in an interview process where it's like clearly a mismatch and these kind of things. But I don't know if that's particular to Berlin, probably just everywhere. Yeah.
How much, just to follow up on that, how much do you have if you're looking to hire for a team and you need to put out a job ad? Is it word for word what you hand to the recruiter? Is the recruiter giving you a template and you're trying to update it? Are they having a 10-minute conversation with you and then writing the description of the job based on what they understand?
So I can write the job ad any way that I want to. Generally, though, it's a combination of sort of a job ad that's already existed, sort of to fit a company kind of broad format, and then I tailor it to the specific job that I want. And I usually have a couple buzzwords near the top, but then get very specific very quickly after that. But some of the other ones that I've read, it's just like an AI-powered, scalable machine learning something is all you're going to do. It's like, okay. On the blockchain, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, I guess I could apply for that, right? I don't know.
Okay, I want to open it up to questions, if anyone has questions for anyone on the panel. And I don't know if we'll pass if you can come down to the side, we can bring up the mic.
Well, first of all, thank you. Very helpful tips. I have two questions, though. First of all, I'm curious about the whiteboarding interviews that you have mentioned about. What are some typical questions or problems of whiteboarding interviews? Are those normal programming interviews, as in lead code problems, lead code or HackerRank, or these are the problems that are inclined to more data science, so maybe implementing some libraries or things like that? That's the first question.
Maybe for at least data analyst positions that I've seen, there was a lot of Excel, SQL definitely, not a lot of Python that I've seen. Yeah, but that I think because those were mostly business intelligence / analyst positions.
I've had Python tasks, I've had SQL tasks, I've had both. And I would say yes, about the level of HackerRank, like the intermediate HackerRank, yes, definitely in that direction. Also, I think some of the companies that I interviewed with gave me, like they just copy-pasted some tasks from a website that hosted like whiteboard interviews for juniordevelopers.com, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Also, rather like the programming related, a little bit more in the algorithmic part, something you could find in the Cracking the Coding interview book, some questions like this. Yeah. Okay. Applying dynamic programming or something.
And for my second question is that, what do you think some qualities or skills that are needed for data science professionals to be successful in this field? Thank you.
Probably the most important is to actually like data science and to be really enthusiastic about it and want to, as I was saying before, really develop your skills, right? So otherwise you're basically going to dead end pretty quickly and you're just going to hate 8 hours of your day every day, right? Yeah, that's probably the biggest one. But the other one, and I also talked about this that I really stress in the interview process, is being able to start from some abstract problem, break it down into its component parts, find out what data you have, and then et cetera, through the whole research process, and then to presenting the results for the audience that is going to find this information most useful. So being able to do that whole thing, regardless of the technologies of how you do it, R, Python, whatever, is super important.
Also, analytical and problem-solving skills, I think, are super essential, and the skill to really understand what the actual problem is, and really get behind it, and dig really deep and find the core of the problem. Because sometimes a stakeholder will give you a very rough description of the problem, and from a data science perspective, maybe the problem lies in a very different part from what your stakeholder thinks it is. So,
I think it also helps that you're open and collaborative with other people, because a lot of the data science problems are, cannot be solved by just like the data alone. In my company, it's always you'll always see people crowding around the computer looking at data, and it's people from the business side and from the pure data science side and from the from the design side, looking at what is going on and what can be gleaned from it. And I think that kind of being open to perspectives, it's really helpful.
Thank you very much for the insights. I have one question. How important do you think cross-functional knowledge is in data science? So, for example, I come from a background of industrial engineering and management, so I had engineering at university as well as business and economics. And what do you think how to approach with such a background to become a data scientist? Do you think it's what like skills or also which courses are important to do, and how can somebody with a background like mine become a data scientist, and also has this like different approach on looking at data, maybe compared to somebody coming from a pure informatics background?
So I have a background in information systems, so I have also business in my studies, and I like to believe that it helps me a lot, especially at my company, where we build software for businesses, and so we try to solve business problems. And it helps a lot if you have a deep understanding of the domain when you look at the data, because you don't need to go to a domain expert right away in order to understand something that might be in the data. So I think this is a really big benefit for choosing a career with a more diverse background than just computer science.
I have a background in foreign languages and translation. So for me, learning how to code was like learning a new language, like the structure and the grammar of a new language. So when writing Python or SQL, I'm always thinking, oh, okay, so this is subject, where's the predicate? Where should I put the question mark, and so on. Maybe that does not answer your exact question, how to become a data scientist, because I'm not one. But definitely helps in comparing different career paths or like transitioning.
In my company, because it's a data-driven consulting company, so cross-functionality is important. Like I said, the reports are read not just by the analytics team of our clients, but also the different parts of the company, from the marketing to their design to their, e-commerce side, for instance. In terms of like what to study, I suppose I can only speak for my case, because I deal with like social media data, so I had to learn a lot of NLP, and like say Python libraries like regex and stuff like that. I don't know, maybe start with something that you're interested in, because otherwise you'll get bored, and that's kind of like terrible, like what Christopher said.
So I also with sort of a mixed background in that regard, I think it's hugely important, because data science, as much as we love, if you love the coding aspects or the math or whatever, ultimately it's just a tool, right, for understanding problems, answering questions, and giving us hopefully some insights in terms of some substantive problem that we have. So having the substantive background can help you really understand the problem and formulate an answer and understand what the data is telling you in a way that, I mean, I guess you could do if you didn't have that background, but it would be a much slower and laborious process. Another thing that's really funny is that oftentimes having the substantive background will help you practically in your data science. So a lot of times members of my team have presented their work and they'll put up a graph and they're like, I spent like 2 weeks trying to figure out why the heck this number is this way, and they'll present it to somebody who has the domain knowledge, and the person with the domain knowledge will go, oh yeah, it was because of this one thing. And it was like they knew right away, right? And so because the person doing the analysis didn't have that domain knowledge, they thought it was a data problem, but it was actually, there was information in the data they just didn't understand because they didn't have the knowledge to understand it.
Maybe to add what concrete skills you could build. So being like fairly fluent in programming helps. Getting the basic data tools right, like pandas and NumPy and so on, helps. Having a solid background in statistical methods and basic machine learning methods, this should be all like a given skill set, stack of skills one should have. And on top of that, one, depending on what you're interested in, if you want to go in a specific domain like NLP, then you can start learning more about this. But like having like programming skills, like knowing the basic libraries in Python, this is, I think, the skill set one definitely needs.
Other questions?
Yeah, thanks again for the insights for me. I just want maybe to follow up on one of the questions before regarding the educational background. So, from a hiring manager's perspective, how would you rate the importance of having a master's degree or PhD, and also compared to like having like actual professional experience?
So I would actually rate it pretty highly, but I think it's important to understand why I'm rating it pretty highly. It's because somebody who's done a master's or a PhD typically has had a lot of opportunities to develop a research project and get into the details, etc. But it's by far not the only place that you could get that, right? So it's an indicator of someone who could do that, and then I try to dig down with them into what exactly did you do during your master's degree or PhD. But you could have that experience in another way, either through kind of industry experience, working in open source, working for data-driven NGOs, things like that also could definitely get that as well.
I think I want to add to that question just whether you think, to the group, whether you think it's different in Berlin job market than in other parts of Germany, if you're applying for data roles with or without the master's or the PhD.
So for the original question, I'm no hiring manager, but from my personal opinion and my personal experience with working with the people around me, I would rate professional experience fairly highly, because certain things just work really well if you work with people that have like on-the-job practical experience. But for certain tasks, you definitely need this research mind, I think. And yeah, then it's really difficult to somehow show if you don't have a academic background. But the other question is, for which jobs do you actually need this? For which data-related positions do you need this? And I think more companies require this than actually would need it. Then to the Berlin question, this is just a gut feeling that I have, is that in Berlin it's a little bit less formal because it's a little bit more international and less German, I would say. I have the feeling that traditionally in Greater Germany you have a bigger focus on formal qualifications. But just my gut feeling, I don't have a very big experience with that.
So I think this is partially a German thing, but I've seen it in other industries. So I used to do a lot of work with people in finance, and they view certain teams, I think in data science or in the finance example, as like a prestige team, right? And so they are almost trying, the expectation is that you would have a team with people with high qualifications because this is your prestige team, and it's kind of goofy, I would have to say, overall, and it's probably going to be a waste of money from management's perspective, but that is definitely a problem. But I would also not want to work on such a team because you're just setting yourself up for frustration, right? So people view it as, you're going to have the AI whatever future, and then you get into the details of, we don't actually have the data to answer this kind of stuff, and it'll just lead to disappointment. So I would avoid those situations also as someone who is applying for positions. Yeah.
So avoid the situation of having lots and lots of academics / PhDs and the prestige team kind of pedigree.
I wouldn't say avoid that. I would say avoid a situation, or avoid situations where that team exists because, not because they had specific needs that those people addressed, but because those people, or the need was having a prestige team and those people had PhDs. So avoid that situation.
So in other words, ask people if they actually use their academic credentials on the job. Okay. Other questions?
You are all great, but my question is for Alina. You said that you need, during your business interviews, you said that you would need, as a junior, mentorship and help to grow further. So have you changed this attitude to get more positive results, or have you kept saying that during the interviews? Yeah,
I kept saying that.
Okay.
I kept saying that because none of them said, "Oh no, we cannot offer you that. We expect you to be like self-organized, and we expect you to do this and that from day one, because this is how we do it." Every interviewer said that yes, of course, mentorship is available. Help. We do have like the entire team of seniors is like here to help you. So yeah, I kept saying that because this is what I was going for. I needed guidance, because I hadn't worked. I never worked in a company where I would be so involved in the business flow, right? My previous jobs all concerned, very artificial doings, not going deep into the infrastructure of the company, right? Whereas now I'm like getting responsibilities. When the server is down, I'm the one who has to switch it on. So yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
More questions? All right. Thank you very much to all our panelists, and thank you to Valentina for organizing the panel.